All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Bailey. I'm one of the assistant principals, director of guidance at Ridgewood High School. Welcome to our fall 22 edition of our College Speaker Series. We're very fortunate tonight to be joined by 4 admissions counselors at 4 colleges that are very popular with our students. And it's a very busy time of year, obviously in high schools, but also at colleges and universities around the country. So we really appreciate these 4 people being here with us tonight. I just want to introduce them. We have Ryan DePuy from Iona, who is with us. We have Patty Peak from Fordham. We have Gabrielle Vyelm from Skidmore and Carlos Nazario from Rutgers. So again, we're extremely fortunate to have these 4 come visit with us at Ridgewood High School and join us and give us a little insight from their perspective. We're also fortunate to have 3 of our own counselors here with us tonight, Mrs. Salerno, Miss Roberts, and Miss Vargo. And these are 3 of our 7 counselors at the high school. And, I said it the other night at our parent meeting, the HSA meeting, our counselors are very passionate about the college admissions process, and they're people I really trust and lean on, during this time. And they're just great resources for our families and for our students here in Ridgewood. So I'm going to actually step aside tonight and just be a viewer and let them run the show. So without further ado, I'll give it over to you guys. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have a few questions that we're going to ask, and each of our college representatives are going to take their time to answer each question. All right. So the first one is, the most recent college admissions cycle was unlike any other. From your point of view, what trends, statistics, or experiences during the process stood out the most to you? And so, Ryan, can you start, please?
Sure. Nothing like being first to the plate. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Ryan DePuy. I'm the Senior Director of Undergrad Admissions at Iona. It has been a roller coaster. For those who haven't learned, the past couple of years have been pretty crazy, not just in the world, but really in higher education through the college admissions process. There's a few things that I've noticed on my side of the desk from where I sit that happened this year that I really think are quite notable. Firstly, I know it's really in the tip of everybody's tongue, but talking about test optional policies being enhanced to, or being widened to more institutions are saying, yay, we're going to keep going until 2025 or whatever the date is that they're going to end. And some institutions even go as far as to adjust the language that they're utilizing to include test blind policies, which would be that they're not even looking for test scores. So that's, I see that enhancement happening. I also noticed this year an increase of students who were undecided with their major. I think that's really virtue of the pandemic. A lot of our students who are going through the process, they didn't have the luxury, they didn't have the privilege of seeing their older peers kind of navigate this process. They've been locked inside for 2 years in virtual, and they're just like, what do I want to do? I don't know. I've been playing video games and been virtual for so long. I don't know. I'm undecided, which is fabulous. They're my favorite kind of students, but I did see an uptick in applications for students who were undecided and who enrolled with me undecided over a previous year. So that's something that I've noticed. And finally, I think this is something that I spoke with a lot of colleagues at a recent conference, is I've really seen a lot of students in the past year continue to stick with the comfort zone, right? Where their comfort zone is or was, sticking with the known institutions, especially as they're kind of navigating the test optional policies. There's a lot of unknowns these days with the college process, and test optional policies is one of those things. And I did notice a lot of students who are really sticking to known institutions as they're going through their search. But again, this is very much from my perspective. More than happy to toss it over to the other panelists as well.
Patricia, do you have more you would like to add?
Sure, I can add. And Patricia, I'm the Dean of Admission and Associate Vice President at Fordham. And so we do a lot of invitations for events for students. And I think tonight is a great example of how colleges are trying to find the right balance between virtual and in-person offerings, and the ability to provide access and reach for students and families in new ways with events like this, where normally we would be coming out maybe and seeing you in a gymnasium or an auditorium, and that can be very challenging with work schedules and other kinds of schedules. This allows recording. This allows you to consume this information. And we're able to do this in so many other ways. So I think it was nice to be able to bring students back to campus again this past year in a more complete way, but also to see how we could complement the campus experience with some virtual experiences that provide a deepening of content. So that's something that I think is making the college admission process hopefully easier, because there's more choice and more availability to learn more about us.
Gabrielle, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Gabrielle Vyelm. I'm Assistant Director of Admission at Skidmore College. Thank you for having me tonight. But, kind of just building off of what Patricia was saying, it's just the moving back into being in person. That's been a big thing for us this year, specifically at Skidmore. We did do a lot of virtual offerings last year, like high school visits, some in person, but now this year we're really starting to kind of get back in the swing of things with more in-person visits, which is really exciting. We are still able to do a lot of virtual things too, which is really great as well. But I think, students are really excited to see and have those personal connections in person. And that's something that we're really excited about too. And in terms of kind of just things that kind of surprised me this past year, in terms of applications we received at Skidmore, we received over 13,000 applications, where normally in past years we get around 11,000. And, I think that's really because students, again, they really just want to get back out there after these past few years. And, we're really looking forward to kind of seeing those numbers go up and up again. So yeah, those are some things that I've noticed as well.
And Carlos, being our largest institution, do you have things to add on the larger scale?
Yeah, on the larger scale, we primarily seen a lot of students now apply to institutions that normally to them would have been a reach institution, particularly as Ryan mentioned earlier, with the test optional, students were applying a little bit more to the Ivy League schools, if you will, or even other institutions that they might have not considered when SATs were mandated. One of the things that we've seen at Rutgers University, we've actually brought in our largest class in history of the institution. So a lot of students are staying within New Jersey as well, and taking advantage of everything that we have to offer here at home.
Thank you so much. All right, my next question is, in this upcoming application cycle, what are the most important aspects of a student's application that you look for when making a decision? And Carlos, can we start with you?
Absolutely. It all involves grades. So for us, the most important things is students are at a upward trend. We're looking for students who are finishing strong their junior year to be stronger than their sophomore year, obviously, and now their senior year finishing off strong. I know a lot of students sometimes decide to have the senioritis and take a little break and take their foot off the gas pedal, but we're actually looking for those students who are consistent throughout. We're looking for students who are active in their community. We're looking for students who are involved in other ventures, whether it's sports, whether it's programs outside of school itself. And as well as we're looking at the essay in which they submit. We do ask for students to submit it because that is a support for us to be able to identify the trends that are happening within the grading system in itself. We are still test optional until 2024. And from there, with the numbers that we'll run and statistics that will show us, we'll see how far we'll go from after that point.
Unmuted myself. Okay, sorry. Gabrielle?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going off of that again, the big thing that we look for in any student's application is to just, of course, make sure that they would be successfully academically here at Skidmore. So the high school transcript is kind of the big piece for us. Just looking at the classes that a student chose to take at their high school over the past 4 years. So we do like to see, that they've been challenging themselves in some way. So taking those AP classes, any honors classes, anything like that, that's a big piece for us. And then also, of course, just how the student performed over the past 4 years of high school as well. So it's a big thing. And also just in terms of subjects, ideally we like to see at least 3 to 4 years of, the core subjects, English, math, science, history, and world language. So again, kind of the transcript is the main piece for us at Skidmore.
Patricia?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe some specialty admission. So there are a number of schools out there that have specialized programs or colleges where you have to think a little bit about what we like to say in Jesuit education, your own discernment. So what are your strengths? What are the things that you want to do? So if you're looking for an artistic program, how would you perform in an audition? What would you present in a portfolio? How much is that taken into consideration in the weight of the program? So most schools that are BA or BFA program will have an academic component to it. So it's weighing the academics as well as the artistic piece and how those fit together and play off each other. It can also be the same for athletic recruitment. And then I also think a lot of students are very interested in business. And if you're interested in business, most business schools are going to be looking very closely about how well you are prepared with quantitative and analytical skills. So are you doing well in math? Whether you're presenting test scores or not, that success in math usually is a good indicator for success in a business program. So thinking through all of those things for special programs is really important when you're applying for anything other than just undecided general liberal arts or general ed.
Great, thank you. And Ryan, do you have any more to add?
So ditto, but oftentimes I do want to add in, I'm thinking about quite a few things. We went test optional back in 2019. So we have the luxury as an institution that receives about 10,000 applications to really dive into each application differently than some of my colleagues might have the opportunity to. So I'm thinking about things like contribution to campus. So I think every college admissions officer across the country can agree that we're looking for academics. We want to check that academic box first, right? But then after we check that box, that's when the real work begins in higher ed, when we're shaping our class. And I start asking questions. How is this student going to engage my community? Who is this person as a learner within my classroom? Who is this person as a roommate? And I'm going to try to answer those questions via the essay or the extracurricular sheet or the recommendation letters that we're receiving. So those are things that carry a lot of weight in the admissions process, but they never are going to supersede the first question I'm asking, which is, as one of my colleagues alluded to, is this student going to perform academically within my milieu? But those are some of the other things that I'm thinking about through the process and really how I'm going to evidence those things.
Great, thank you. As we're talking about the application review, the term holistic review comes up a lot. As counselors, we hear that, students. If each of you can just talk about what holistic review looks like in your office and what it looks like when you get a student application. Gabrielle, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, holistic review, we're really looking at everything. Of course, the transcript is kind of that core piece, but really kind of just building off of that. So again, the essay, really just talking about something that the student's passionate about, something interesting they've experienced. That's where their voice really shines through in the application. Really looking at those recommendation letters too, as well, kind of going off of, again, what Ryan was saying, how they would be as a community member here at Skidmore. And I think those recommendation letters and just looking at the activities list really gives us kind of a good idea of how they would be engaged. So, again, we're really kind of looking at everything and we just want to make sure that the student is well-rounded and that they, again, would be successful at Skidmore. So that's kind of what we mean by holistic review.
Thanks. And I'm not going to throw this at you particularly, and anyone can chime in. And again, we get this question a lot, from our juniors who are kind of putting the puzzle together into senior year. What kind of activities should I be doing, or what should I focus on? And I'm sure you get that as well. So I'm going to ask that as if I was a student. So what activities do you look for?
Yeah, I think community service is always great. A lot of students are on like their National Honor Society at school, say they're in athletics, kind of just everything across the board. And if there is one thing that a student is really, really passionate about, that's awesome because they're dedicating so much time to that one thing. So we definitely will look at that and see that also.
Great, thanks. Ryan? You're on mute, my friend. Sorry.
I totally made like a 2020 mistake. My gosh, I'm such a rookie to do that. But I totally stole my thunder in my previous commentary. Holistic admissions, at least for us, means that I'm dipping into each aspect of the student's life because I want to understand how they're going to be both in and out of the classroom here. How are they going to enrich their environment? How are they going to engage? These are all questions that we're asking, and I'm going to utilize the letter's recommendation and to evidence, who the student is in the classroom from a teacher's perspective. How the student has grown over a period of 4 years from the counselor letter. These are all important documents from us. From the essay, I can learn a lot from a student. From their perspective, and I want to see the world through their eyes, which is so important to us. So I'm learning a little bit about the student from all the aspects of the application. One thing I neglected to mention previously is that, at least at my institution, we do interviews. So the interview is part of the holistic admissions process. We don't require it, but strongly encourage it. And it really gives us an opportunity to put a face to a name and advocate for our students through the committee process in the best way we possibly can. When it comes to activities, frankly, it doesn't matter. Students and families always have to remember that we're building classes of hundreds, if not thousands of students. And we really want to be consistent with the mission of our organizations, but we're going to build classes that are going to play off each other's strengths, right? Like I need bagpipers, but I don't need a whole class of bagpipers. I need some bagpipers, but I need some students who are going to write in the paper and some photographers and musicians. I need students who are going to contribute to campus life in all different ways. I need leaders, but I also need team players. So there's not one activity that really would be greater than any other. It's all about being involved in something that you're passionate about. I'll give you a really great example. About a year and a half ago, we founded an esports program here at the university, and I've had it at my previous institutions. This is my third institution I've served. And my other institutions, it was like, some kids would do it. It was like not like the big thing. Here at Iona, it just blew up. Like 120 students joined it immediately. They won their conference championships for esports. They're competing nationally now. And it's a big part of culture. And it gives students an opportunity to engage in a really fun way outside the classroom. So really, like video games, if written correctly on an application, could be something that is a-okay. And I hear like a gasp from parents all the way here in New York, but nevertheless, really anything a student is passionate about and they're dedicating time and energy to something is something that schools may find valuable depending upon the institution.
Thanks. All right. Carlos?
Thank you. I think I'll go in reverse as well as far as the activities. One of the reasons that we look at the activities that the students are partaking in is because we want to see how successful they are in the classroom while still being involved outside of the classroom. There are so many students who are successful without having any activities, and that's fine. But those students we look at and holistically review them that way because they've been involved in other things, whether it's sports, whether it's band, whether it's any other activity outside of the school, and still are showing success. That tells us that they have the grit, if you will, to be successful. When they get into higher education, their time is their own. So now seeing individuals who can handle the rigor of classes as well as their activities shows us that they are able to succeed within the university level. And it's not to say that a student who does not have any activities, but is successful in the classroom is not a student who we want, but it just gives a little bit more of a emphasis on those students who are participating in the activities as well as being successful in the classroom. So that involves our holistic approach in copying what the other colleagues have mentioned as well.
Great. Patricia, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about like activities or just when you get an application across your desk, anything that stands out to you?
Sure. I think the final piece is another word that I think is becoming very strong within the nomenclature, is within context. And context really can't be separated from holistic. So when we have a school's profile and a familiarity with a school like Ridgewood, we understand the level of courses the students are taking. We understand the opportunities they have and don't have, what activities there might be, what different APs might be available. So all of that is meant to create for us kind of a baseline picture from where we can start a holistic read. And that's going to be very different than when we as readers look at other high schools or other programs. And so each student not only is treated as an individual, they're treated as an individual within the context of their high school and community as part of that application process. So there's really a lot of layers and depth that goes into everything that we talked about this evening. And so it's not really kind of a very broad brush that it's painted with about activities or essays or grades. It's really within what's happening within that student's sphere. And that's important.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a good point. Thank you.
And Laura, if I might hop in for one brief second, something that has come up with a lot of families I've worked with in the past few years, and even before COVID, is always remember that activities won't supersede academics, right? I've had parents come to me and say, Ryan, my student would have done better, but they did so much. They were playing sports and community service and doing so much outside the classroom, all of which is very important, but you should not continue to push and do things at the expense of academics. That's always one thematic I always want to drive home to families. You know, it's important to be involved, but don't do so at the expense of your academics.
Yeah, thank you. So my next question. So sometimes we have students that want to check in with us. They are nervous to hit submit on Common App. They think that they've made a mistake, first time doing it. What are some common errors that you see on your end, or some mistakes that are kind of quick fixes that you'd like to share? Carlos, let's start with you. I know you have, and this is good to start because it's your own application. It's the Rutgers App.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. So for us, we have several things. What we prefer is a student just take their time filling out the application, read the questions, answer the questions as such. For us, our biggest issue would be students completing our self-reported academic record and not putting in the proper grades or not putting it in the proper coursework. So just taking their time, being able to submit those grades properly into the proper section so that we can read through that process. What happens is a lot of times is the students we'll see the trend that just doesn't match, something's wrong within it, and then we'll ask for an update, which delays the reading of their application. And for us, just last year, having a little bit over 22,000 applications to read, it's a little difficult to come back to students who have made a mistake. So basically, we just ask, just take your time, submit the application in. Once you have read it over, make sure that the self-reported academic record is in correct form and submit. And then from there, at any time, they can reach out to our offices if they have any changes that need to be made, but we'll ask for documentation for that.
Thank you. Gabrielle, anything you see on your end?
Yeah, I think a big thing is just proofreading your essays. I've seen sometimes where we have the wrong college name in like an essay. So just make sure that someone's kind of looking over that as well before you hit submit. That's kind of the main thing that I would say that I've seen on my end for both the personal essay and for any supplemental essays that you might be writing also.
Yes, that's a common one. Patricia, how about you?
I think every element in the application is an opportunity. And I'm always sad when some part of the application is left empty or incomplete, because that's an opportunity that was missed for us to get some other nugget or piece about the student that could add some element that we're looking for in that application to understand that whole student. So I agree with Ryan. There are certain parts of the application that even if they're outstanding will never outweigh whether or not the student's going to be successful. But always think about, especially as you're looking at selective college admission, every opportunity could lead to something not just about admission, but about scholarship, but about honors and special programs. So those are the types of things that if you slow down, and I think that's the theme, if you slow down and take your time and look at every question and say, why are they asking it? What do I need to put here? How best do I use this 150 characters to my advantage? Those are the things that you should really be spending the time on. And the Common App allows you to do that because so much of it you're doing only once. And then you can focus on the member questions, the individual colleges, with even more depth.
Great, thank you. And Ryan?
Ultimately, a couple of things I see on my side that can be fixed so quickly. Firstly, a student should never apply on their phone. Like it sounds so elementary, right? Like you wouldn't apply to college on your phone. That's just silly, but you'd be surprised, folks. Students do it, right? It's easy. You can do it. I suggest you don't, because it messes with the formatting. Even with the essay, when you copy and paste your essay, and there's nothing more daunting for a reader as we're reading through applications. So just to give you some insight, like usually readers kind of chain ourselves to our desk over the winter, and we're just keeping warm by the glow of our monitors as we read applications all day. And there's nothing more daunting than seeing like an ill-formed format essay as we pull it up on our second screen. And oftentimes it's done because a student didn't copy and paste right. It was done on a mobile device. That's a really quick fix. Everything else my colleagues had mentioned, I endorse and agree with 100%. It's really just about seizing every opportunity you can to showcase the best of you and why you belong at that specific institution. And the Common App, as Patty pointed out, and it is wonderful in that way because you have the time to really go through your application with a fine-tooth comb just to ensure you're doing just that.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question. There's a lot of activity leading up to before students submit applications. Maybe they visit campus, or Ryan, like you said, maybe they set up an interview before they submit. But after students submit the application, should they still continue to demonstrate interest, and what should that look like? Patricia, do you want to kick that one off?
Yes, and I think that's going to be different for every college. So there are colleges that really do consider demonstrated interest straight through the process, and many of them are just very upfront about that, and so you should know that. But what demonstrated interest really is something that is authentic. So just emailing us consistently with updates, even if we're a school that considers it or not, that's not going to be considered demonstrating interest. That's just going to be kind of spamming our emails a little bit because we're not going to be able to absorb all of that. It really has to be authentic in the sense of you have come to some events, virtual or not, and you've had meaningful engagement with us. If we make the effort to come to your school, either in person or virtual, then we want to see that you've made the effort maybe to engage with us if that was possible. And if that's not possible, then that's a great opportunity for an email to the counselor to say, I was in my class and I couldn't come to your high school visit, so I'm reaching out now, just want to say a little bit about myself. I'm looking forward to apply. It can be something as simple as that. But again, it's about quality of your engagement and not quantity of your engagement. So just think about how you want to make that meaningful. And when you have an update or a change to your application, that's when you want to put something in writing so it doesn't get lost, so that we know there's something important coming through. That's very, very important. And the one last thing I would say, because we are a school that has early action and early decision, and we do defer students when we want more information, we have a form. And that form says, I want you to continue to consider me, which is what we're hoping you're going to say, because a deferral isn't a denial. We're just looking for more. But so many students don't complete the form or don't complete the form on time. those are the things that show true interest and sincerity in the process and can really help you as you move along down the different phases in the admission funnel.
Thank you. Gabrielle, what should it look like on your end at Skidmore?
Yeah, I really 100% agree with Patricia. It really is very similar for us. If you're able to come and visit us in person, take a tour, do an information session, that's really awesome. But again, we do have so many different virtual opportunities as well. We do have some virtual open houses, virtual information sessions. Those are great once you're going through the application process. But then after you submit, if you do have any updates, like Patricia was saying, we love to kind of see those. So I did have quite a few students email me after they submitted their application last year, just kind of updating me on anything, if they won any awards, if they kind of got this cool opportunity, definitely send those over because we are able to add those to your file. So yeah, I definitely think it's worth it, again, if it is meaningful and it's something that you do want us to look at further.
Thanks. Ryan, what does it look like at Iona?
I always think about these type of things as kind of a conversation, if you will. It's a very tangible way for me to kind of approach it. And you're going to let the school take the lead. After you submit your application, that's kind of you kind of putting the ball in their court. And ultimately, it really depends on what their decision timeline looks like, how quickly it's going to come into effect. What do you want to share with the institution in that time frame, right? So it really depends on the institution and the relationship they're seeking to build with the applicant pool in total. But I would say at the end of the day, if there's something really important to share on behalf of your application, share it. If there's a genuine question that you have, ask it. And if you're going to take a visit for the sake of taking a visit to help you inform you through the college process, then visit. But don't just visit to be like, hey, right here, I'm here. I just want to let you know I'm here. Come and visit because it's going to help you through this process, and ultimately those are some of the questions I think about as you might want to check as you go through the process. If you're being deferred or you're waitlisted, certainly definitely let the school kind of take the lead in that one. Oftentimes schools might even say, they might say, don't email me. Or they'll say nothing. And if that's the case, go to your school counselor, ask your resources and say, how frequently should I express my interest to a school that waitlisted me? And maybe it's just like a once per month, email, hey, still totally interested. I filled out the form, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you really want to let the school kind of take the lead in the conversation after you submit your application there and when and how you should engage.
Thanks. Carlos?
Yes, I think engagement is important, particularly when visiting an institution. One of the things that I've always said, if you consider yourself to be a round peg and the institution is a square hole, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. No matter what the institution is and no matter what the reputation is. So it's important to visit the institution, see yourself there, see yourself engaging with other students there on campus, because it's not just engaging with us. We believe engaging with other students is going to help you make the decision and to help you be more successful at our institution. Being so large and divided into 5 different locations within New Brunswick, those schools that you'll be traveling back and forth from, you have to be part of that environment. You have to be part of that community. And that's the way our students succeed, because they're involved not just with our admissions officers, but with other students. And I know I have a question in the chat room as far as someone asking about first choice on our application. Every school decides makes their own decision, whether it's North Campus or the Camden campus. They independently make their choices. So no matter who you put first, you can still be admitted to all campuses. And the decision will be on the student on which campus they decide to go to. Sorry for adding that in there as well. So trying to answer the questions at the same time.
I think I'm up. Am I up? Yes. Okay. Wasn't sure if everyone was done. Okay. Hi. My question to you guys, and this has to do with you guys come into the school, we have rep visits, and a lot of the students don't know what to ask when they sit down with you. Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's in a larger group. So we are wondering, what are some memorable questions students have asked you about your college, or what questions do you look forward to answering from the students? Let's start with Gabrielle.
Yeah, so I love this question. I actually spoke with a student yesterday, and it was the most interesting question I had ever been asked. And that was, if you could describe Skidmore as a piece of music, how would you describe it? It's a very unique question, and it really got me thinking. And, you know, those questions are really awesome. Also just questions about like what makes Skidmore or whatever college distinctive, just so you can kind of figure out what that college is all about, maybe like the motto, unique programs that a college might have, some unique buildings on campus. It really kind of gives you kind of a better idea as well. And then questions I kind of look forward to. I'm an alum of Skidmore, so I graduated with the class of 2021, so pretty recent. And this is kind of personal to me, but I really love getting questions still about my experience. I was a tour guide when I was at Skidmore, and, you know, I still love talking about it and talking about my experience as a student. So those are the questions that I personally really love answering.
Great, thank you. She asked you a supplement question, basically, about the music. Patty.
Well, when students ask me about my experience at Fordham, I'm like, well, you know, when we have to go back now decades, it's no longer relevant, but I do like to answer it too. But seriously, I think any question that is just so Fordham specific or New York specific or major specific that I know the student looked at the kind of our literature or our website, got the basis and wants to go deeper, right? And so when we can really engage in those conversations, that's so great. And admission officers, we don't know everything about every major. So we know about many of them, but not in depth. But just that ability to kind of hear what the questions are, then find the faculty person that we can connect you with, or suggest a program or a visit opportunity where you could get more information about that feeling like you've really moved the football down the field with this interest and learning about the institution. That's really exciting because now you know that you're helping to counsel and advise. And I think that's very rewarding for all of us, especially when we deal with a lot of volume and don't get to spend as much time individually with students.
Great, thank you. Ryan?
I love when students ask me questions, and everything my colleagues had shared so far are certainly things I get behind and love as well. But I love talking about student traditions. They tend to be things that may not be on the webpage or explicitly on the webpage. Like you see maybe pictures of those things happening, but you don't really understand the context. So I think it's really, really great when we have an opportunity to talk about like student traditions or our favorite student tradition or tradition on campus. I love when students ask about how do faculty and or staff engage with students on campus, like what their experience is going to be like. I think that's a really fun question to answer. A question I wish more students would ask about is I wish more students would ask kind of beyond the admissions process, but like how they can feel supported both in and out of the classroom at the institution. You know, I think the support piece is something that I've always been a fan of, but even post-pandemic, if you can even say post-pandemic, is coming up and being a little bit more brought to the surface. And I wish more students would understand what great services our institutions are able to offer both in and out of the classrooms to make sure they're not just successful students, but really successful, you know, young adults transitioning into the world. So I wish more students would ask me questions about what we're doing there.
That's great. Thank you. Carlos.
I think the most memorable question that I've always gotten is, why did Rutgers University turn down to be an Ivy League school? The actual answer is that Rutgers University applied for statehood as a state institution in 1945. We did not get acceptance until 1956. Ivy Leagues began in 1954. So by the time we started our process to become a statehood institution, Ivy Leagues were informed at the time. And we decided, and I think we made the proper choice to stay as a state institution either way. But just to echo what my colleagues are saying is, it's important to know and understand what the institution you are ready to talk about, and that you've done some homework prior to walking into to a fair, or even making a phone call and an inquiry on something that you can basically find out, oh, where are you located? When that's just something that's easily found in the website. But to come to us with questions that involve and engage the counselor, in which would make us think a little bit more about those answers that we're given, because the actual fact is, everyone is here to get you to go to their institution. Our goal is to make sure that you're the right fit, because we really just want you to become a successful alum of our institution and support once you graduate.
Great, thank you. And I know some of this has been very much geared towards maybe the current seniors and the application process. So this question can apply to them as well, but a little bit more for the underclassmen. What tips do you have to share with future applicants and younger high school students for this roller coaster process? Carlos, if you don't mind, I want to go backwards. So if you want to, do you mind going first?
No, I can talk backwards. Great. As well.
Thank you.
So if you wanted to do that. I think we mentioned it, my colleagues and I mentioned it already today, was, challenge yourselves. If you can take an AP course, an honors course, and be successful in those courses, then take them, but not at the risk of harming your academic standing. We do accept students who have never taken an honors course, has never taken an AP course. So that if you take an honors and you take an AP course, we're looking for you to be successful in that honors and AP course. So just don't register or sign up for an AP or an honors course and you become an average student, if you will. We really want you to be successful. We really want you to challenge yourself, but to be successful at the same time. Thank you.
Great. Ryan, I think you were going in reverse. I think you're up.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you. I have one great piece of advice, and it's really just quite practical. We'll start with that, then I'll give you the real advice. But the practical advice is, colleges love to send a lot of material, right? So for the students and families in the room, one of the biggest challenges or roadblocks I have in the process is just getting the parents and students on the same page, folks, right? Like just everybody on the same page. So for the younger underclassmen in the room, create a college-going email account on Gmail, right? Ryan goes to college because it's awesome at gmail.com, right? And everybody gets a password. Everybody has access on their mobile phones, right? And that way it lets everybody make sure that they're informed about lacking credentials after they apply, or when open house dates are, or a million other things. And to boot, the great benefit, the fringe benefit, is it keeps your personal or business inboxes clear of all the clutter that you will get from the college process. I mean, we send a lot. I acknowledge it. I send a lot. We can't help ourselves. That's what we do in higher ed, right? However, that's a really great practical piece of advice. Just create one account for the college process for each one of your students, or for yourself as you're going through the process. And the larger real piece of advice is use your resources. The counseling team at Ridgewood is fantastic. You have an opportunity to leverage them through the process, leverage anybody else within your community, leverage your admissions counselors, your financial aid counselors, ask questions. You don't have to be a pro in this process. It's okay to look like a tourist, because you are. And that's okay. Embrace it. Have a little fun. You might actually have some by accident. But that's my piece of advice. Really use your resources, ask questions, and be engaged in the process. And generally speaking, I see these processes tending to work themselves out. I know a lot of students expect one thing in the beginning of the process and they get something very different at the end, and it's still okay. So that would be my best piece of advice.
Great, thank you. Patty?
It's to be open at every stage in the process. And just remember, there are more than 4,000 institutions in the United States alone. There are plenty of others worldwide. So you can expand your horizons to international institutions, but not all of them and not most of them are super selective. And so if you allow the conversation to be driven by what happens at institutions that accept less than 10% of their applicants, then you're going to be kind of putting that on all the rest of the institutions that have much more flexibility and openness to craft their classes in different ways. So you absolutely should look at those institutions, but remember, you're going to find a number of great institutions that you might thrive at, as long as you're open to considering them and adding them to your list, and thinking about whether or not that could be the place that could be for you.
Thank you. Gabrielle.
Yeah, Patty, you really took the words right out of my mouth. You really just have to keep an open mind throughout the process. Again, there are so many wonderful colleges out there. And continue taking classes and doing activities that you're really, really interested in and passionate about, and find those colleges based off of those things. You might have one college that you're totally set on going to, but there are also probably so many other colleges that also kind of fit exactly what you're looking for too. So again, just kind of keeping an open mind and doing the exploring and making it fun.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And we have a few more minutes left, but those points were so powerful there at the end. And I think this is a time of the year where there's a lot of nerves and a lot of anxiety and with students and parents. But I've shared this a few times, but from our senior survey data last year, and it's a number I'm proud of because I think it speaks well to our counselors and our parents and our community, but 84% of our kids last year were admitted into one of their top 3 schools. And the other 16%, they got into great schools as well. So to Patricia's point and Gabrielle, and there are a lot of unknowns right now. I was talking to some seniors this week, and it's just a strange time because you don't know where you're going to be next September. But it's normal to feel a little bit unsettled right now. But the point is, for 84% of the kids to be in one of their top 3 schools that they wanted to be in this time last year, that speaks to our counselors and parents and students doing a great job finding a balanced list of schools and finding the right fit. Because like Patricia said, there's so many great schools out there, and it's all about what you do with those opportunities. There's a lot out of our control right now. Like the students have done all that they can do. They're going to apply. They're going to continue to do well in school. They're going to have fun. They're going to have a great senior year. But there is some anxiety now as we wait and let these great people do their job on the other end. So there were a few questions that came up, and I'd like to try to get to a few of them. And we are going to end at 8 o'clock to respect, all of our college's times here. So the one was about 2022 and kind of the numbers that we saw. And the question was deferral candidates from prior years due to COVID. Did they have an issue on the class of 22? And will that spill over into this year's class? Have you seen any patterns kind of coming out of that? I mean, the big fear from our level and the parents' level seems to be just kind of the number of applications at all of your schools are skyrocketing. So I know that's kind of nice on your end, although it's a lot more work, I'm sure, but it definitely makes parents and students and high school counselors a little bit more nervous. So if you could talk to any trends in the last 2 to 3 years on that, that'd be great. Whoever wants to go.
Well, I'll jump in on that because I think it relates to the last comment I made. If you're only accepting 10% of your applicant pool, then deferrals are going to make a difference mathematically if they go up. For the majority of schools that are in between 25 and 60%, a few more deferrals here or there are not going to make the magnitude of that number change. So again, it's what schools you're applying to, that's going to be the difference. Now, conversely, huge spikes in application, that's going to change for schools. We consistently have been above 40,000 for the last, I don't know how many years. between 45 and 47,000 for at least 5 or 6 years. So we didn't experience that, but others did. So maybe I'll defer to those who might have seen some spikes in recent years.
So at Rutgers University, the spike really wasn't that much on the students, how many applications went actually through, is actually the quality of students who actually came through. And I think that showed the success of the class that we brought in. We actually had a better class statistically coming through as far as the GPAs were concerned, since we were test optional. So it was never, it's never the point for us as far as what the percentage that we're going to accept into our classes. It's just the quality of students that are coming through. And again, it just showed that I believe that a lot of students from New Jersey decided to stay put in New Jersey and stay at their home state.
So just a couple more here. There's some good questions here, and I'm just gonna have to pick a few just for time's sake. But briefly, the difference between early decision and early action, and how do these how does this choice impact the likelihood of being considered for your school?
I can kick off with there. And ultimately, ED, early decision, EA, early action, oftentimes confuse a lot of families. When I kind of share it with families, think of ED as like proposing, right? EDs, you get down on one knee and you go, well, thou take me to be my spouse or whatever. And if we say yes, we get married and live happily ever after. That's ED, right? It's a binding decision. You sign a contract, quite literally, with an institution saying, if you take me, I'm coming. Could it impact admission? It can, and that's going to be entirely dependent on the institution to which you're considering. To be very fair, for some institutions, it may not matter. For some other institutions, it could matter a lot. A lot of institutions were kind of someplace in the middle, right? Where you still have to check all the boxes that we're looking for, right? But demonstrated interest can be shown in a lot of places, but the highest amount of demonstrated interest you could ever express is an ED ad. And every school acknowledges that, whether or not they look at other points of ED. So, it really depends on the institution. EA, you're still kind of saying, hey, I'm super interested, but I'm not ready to get married yet.
I appreciate that. The other, I kind of joke about this is because we're from New Jersey, so we don't trust anyone. But the test optional piece, that all 4 of your schools have gone test optional, and so how do you manage that from your end with students who send scores and students who do not send scores? And if you have any data or percentages, or kind of give us a breakdown if you can share that data.
Yeah, I mean, on my end, if you did take the SAT or ACT and you feel that your score is a good reflection of who you are as a student, I always say go ahead and submit. Also, if your score falls within the certain ranges for the schools that you're applying to, I always, again, say go ahead and submit it. But test optional, for us, if you choose not to submit those test scores, we're not going to go looking for them. And it does not negatively affect your application in any way, shape, or form if you choose not to submit those test scores. I would say last year, maybe about less than half of students chose not to submit their test scores. That's probably, I would say, the percentage for students on our end.
One of the things that I'm really most proud of coming out of the pandemic is I've always been a fan of test optional policies. Always have been. I've never been the most popular person at the College Board. I always say that the exams are great to have. But, not every institution, you can't really kind of judge a student holistically and just look at the test scores. Who a student is on 3 hours on some random Saturday isn't who all they are, right? I think it's a component and an important one at that, but it's not the only thing. So I've always been a fan of test optional policies. And I think one of the great things we've done in the past couple of years is really look at students in the process differently. And with great success. We went test optional here at Iona back in November of 19. And it really took it was a hard sell to the faculty. They just couldn't fathom the process without scores. They're like, well, how do you do your job then? You know, like they legitimately questioned. They were really concerned, like, how would we admit a class without test scores? And we went through it and we talked to them about holistic admissions and the whole 9 yards. But when it comes to test optional policies, I'm a big fan of the direction we've moved in. I think we got some great solid data. I'm looking forward for the next admission cycle where we'll learn even a little bit more, not only about how the class enrolled, but how they're persisting at each one of our respective institutions. Because I think the data is really going to make a great case for itself. That said, the one thing I do want to share about test optional policies is make sure you read the fine print, okay? Because there could be some test optional institutions that are out there that might say, we're test optional, but not for this major. Or we're test optional, but not if you're looking for merit money, or you know, we're test optional, but not if you'd like to be in the honors program. So there might be certain facets or programs within that respective institution that might require test scores. So my advice to students is to continue to test, try your best, forget the rest, and have a test score in your back pocket. And ask each school, check their webpage, and see if you need to submit your test score. See if you're kind of in that middle 50% of enrolled students from that class, and if your test score is kind of in that bell curve. And I think that's a really great place to start the conversation with the school counselor about whether or not you should submit. From many of our ends, you know, we look at, you know, if we're test optional, whether or not they submit largely becomes irrelevant to us, but that may not be true for every one of us. So I would continue to ask the questions. Most schools are pretty candid about how they utilize it.
We're truly test optional. 55% of our admitted students did not submit testing. We will consider all students for all programs and all merit scholarships, with or without testing. I actually think it's kind of converse. We caution students that if your testing isn't within scholarship range, then there's no need to submit that if all other pieces are strong. So is the testing doing two things in my mind? Is it adding value to your application, a positive additional piece of information? Or two, is it truly reflective of who you are? It's presenting you holistically, because that is exactly who you are. Those tests are really showing exactly where your strengths are. So, you know, we may have someone who decides to send in a slightly unbalanced test because their math is so strong and they're applying for the business school. So, you know, those are the things where it's just not very, you know, kind of a blanket answer. It's really looking at the institution, as Ryan said, and then thinking about, okay, what's going to be the important piece for me to share here or not share.
Thank you. That's great feedback. So last question of the night, and it came from a parent. So it does, we get this quite a bit in Ridgewood, and it seems more and more families are paying for expensive college counselors and essay tutors. Is the authenticity of this process at risk? So how do you evaluate students knowing there are so many hands involved in the process?
I'll take this question. So I would say we don't, we won't tell a parent not to utilize those services, but I believe it was Ryan who mentioned that using your counselor's office may do the same thing for free. The essay, don't think that the essay is actually putting that much value compared to the transcript. When we read an essay, we don't read it for the authenticity of the writer. We read it for the subject. We read it for the content of it, to see whether or not the student's validity of the grades or the trends that it was set, because we can't identify the authenticity of it. So we won't put that much value in someone writing an essay for someone else. But more importantly, I would say this: careful on careful on what it is that is being submitted by someone else. I would suggest that don't let no agency or any tutor or what have you submit any documentations for you. Submit everything yourself. We had a case in where we did have, in our institution, we did have a professional application person submit an essay for 4 students, and it was the same exact essay, in which we had to rescind every single decision because we couldn't authenticate the essay. So if you're going to submit something, make sure you're submitting it yourself. Don't let someone else submit for you, so that way you are knowing that what you're submitting to the institution is your own work and not someone else's.
This might tie, Dave, to one of the earlier questions about, are we looking, I think, for students who are all high achieving and don't make mistakes? I think I saw that very early in the chat. And authenticity matters in the fact that we are not looking for perfect students. We are looking for students who have faced challenges, but how did they respond to them? Who maybe tried something and it didn't work out, but they learned from it. Who may have made a mistake, but owned up to it. You know, it's all about how you react and present what your learnings from your life experiences. And so when an application is just too perfect, I actually think you're doing yourself a disservice. So if we have to sit there and wonder, did you write this essay? If we have to wonder, you know, how could someone do all these activities and spend all this time? Then you're actually making us less inclined to want to have you in the community than more inclined, right? So to see you in your imperfect, growing, learning self is what we expect at this stage. So I think we're very excited when we see students, you know, of course, present their best selves, their best picture of themselves, but it doesn't have to be so ideal that it's just not achievable.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I listened to all four of you, and what I tell the kids, and we try to tell the kids, is these are people on the other side here that are reading your application, and typically they're people who really care about the university or college, and they're trying to bring kids into their family. And it needs to be the right fit. So you don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, you know, be a perfectly written essay. In fact, like one of the things we concentrated on this year was the supplemental essays, because we had feedback that the essays were always groomed perfectly and written very well, but then the supplement essay might look like it was put together on Halloween for November 1st. And that might be the most important piece to, you know, Ryan at Iona or Patricia at Fordham, where you're speaking about that college and university and why you want to apply there. So I really appreciate, you know, you all giving us your time tonight. Again, I know it's a very busy time of year, but you really, for you to take an hour and give your perspective and give our community all this insight, we really appreciate it. And we will share this out. So there were about 100 people here this evening watching, but we will put this this link out, and you'll be able to access it at any time. So thank you all. Have a great night.